All right. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to class today. We've got a full class full of students. You'll see here. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I am Dr. Chris Roddenberry. I'd like to thank you people who are here online. And we're going to begin our second lecture of the semester. Before we get started, I do want to direct your attention to the feedback that I've given you on Blackboard and that you folks see right here in class. I believe it's important to give a little bit of feedback to the students so that you can kind of see how you're performing and seeing how you're performing compared to the rest of the students, especially since we're using kind of an odd grading scheme this particular semester. So I just want to let you know how we're all doing in our assignment. By the way, if you can hear me online, give me a thumbs up or something in the chat bar to let me know. But if you'll look here in the seated class, every last one of you did the course entry quiz. The same thing with the online class. Fantastic. Thank you very much for not making that difficult. Now, also, a majority of you have signed up for Remind. Did any of you get the text reminders that I sent about the assignment due dates this weekend? Were they helpful or not helpful? And you can speak, huh? Helpful, okay. Did anybody, be quite honest, find them annoying?
They were annoying, but they were helpful at the same time, so it was kind of like a double-edged sword.
Fantastic. Well, check it out. There is a money-back guarantee here. You already signed up for it. You can keep your collaboration point. If at any point you decide that the annoyance is not worth the value, send me an email. I would be more than happy to take you off of the Remind group. What I find, come on in, is that a lot of students that wind up dropping my class are the ones that don't sign up for Remind. I'm not sure if their slackness is why they don't sign up and that's why they do poorly in the class, or if the reminder's really that helpful. However they are for you, and you are always welcome to sign up at any point during this semester. Now, at the writing assignments, the homework assignments that you did, if you look, at home, you students can look at what's on the screen in front of you. If you'll notice right here, 20 out of 27 of you completed the assignment at an A level. I mean, right now you have to do other things to get the A, but you at least did the homework assignment such that you are eligible for an A. 5 out of you completed the assignment, but you didn't get a 95. Remember, in order to make at least a C in this class, you have to do all of the homeworks and you have to make at least 95 on them. Now, you can try them as many times as you want during the semester and it will record your highest grade. So even if you haven't done the writing assignment yet and a couple of people haven't done the homework, you can still do the homework and get credit for them. At any point during this semester, you may make sure your quizzes are all up to the 95% level. I see everybody online's giving me claps and talking about how helpful the stuff was. Thank you very much. Let me get a little applause for me. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. They hear applause online. You don't. Okay, unlimited retakes allowed. And I've noticed that 25 out of 27% of you have at least earned 2 collaboration points so far this semester. You are on track to fulfill your collaboration requirement. In fact, of the online students, 40, almost half of them have earned 4 collaboration points. They came to my extra credit webinar and they did the signed up for Remind. So actually, while some of you students did a good job here in the seated class, the online class kicked your butt. So I don't know if you want to compete with them. So don't let the online class do this to you, okay? So that's what I want you to know for this semester. I hope this doesn't get annoying, but I think it's important for us to at least know where we are. If at any point during the semester you want to call me and ask me or email me and ask me what your grade is in the class, I will be more than happy to talk to you about your grade. Is that cool? Any questions? Let's get back to this. All right, so here's the deal. Last week we talked about chapter 1 of the textbook, okay? It was all about an introduction to the class. This week, or what I'm doing this semester, is I'm bouncing around the textbook a little bit and I'm putting chapters together that I think are interesting. So this week's lecture is called Hereditary Genius, okay? A cautionary tale about science. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about IQ testing and research methods, because they both really kind of go together very well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind, and I'm going to switch to the PowerPoint presentation that we have. Oh my goodness. Now, those of you who are sitting in class and those of you online know that with every lecture that we have here, I do have the PowerPoint presentation with the links in it. Feel free to look at that as a resource. You'll notice in the bottom right hand, corner of every page, you'll see right here where it says text reference. You can actually go to your textbook and find the information that is there, okay? Now, what we're going to talk about today is the question of whether or not we should trust science. I don't know if you folks have seen lately, but we are in a crisis of science here, where people are talking about scientific things. Some people believe everything that comes out of scientists' mouths. Some people don't believe a single thing that comes out of people's mouth. And people are asking the question, should I trust science? Should I trust science? The goal for this week is for you to understand a very important thing. You should trust science, okay? Science is a set of tools. Science desires the truth. Science will never lie to you. Sometimes science is wrong, but science will always find the correct answer and it won't purposefully lie to you. On the other hand, scientists are human beings, and scientists have prejudices, they have beliefs, they have misconceived notions. And so what I want you to understand this week is that going forward, having taken this class, I want you to be a good consumer of science. I want you to believe science, but I want you to understand how scientists can be wrong, okay? Now, a real science. I consider myself a scientist. I hope each and every one of you considers yourself to be a scientist. Here's what you need to be a scientist. Number one, you need to be skeptical. Everybody's going to make claims. If you're on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or social media or wherever you go, everybody's making claims. The first time you hear something, you need to say, where's the proof? Where's the proof? Show me some proof. Now, here's the deal. Even though a scientist is skeptical, one of the things I find is that a lot of people are unwilling to change their mind, to be flexible, to be willing to be convinced. A lot of my friends who hate science hate the fact that sometimes science changes its mind. They're like, if you know the truth, you shouldn't have to change your mind. No, what? Go ahead. But a real scientist knows sometimes you have to change your mind if you get the proof, right? And you know what? The best part about a scientist, a real scientist, they understand that you shouldn't trust scientists too. They are skeptical in their own beliefs. They're always looking at themselves to make sure that they are not coming to the wrong conclusion. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about research methods, how to make you a better consumer of research methods. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to talk about IQ testing, because nothing in the world is more controversial than IQ testing. It's one of the most important human measurements that we have, at least as a society. So anytime you start measuring that, people's biases and preconceived notions come into the picture. So I'm going to show you that as an example of how maybe science can get it a little bit wrong, if you will. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with social psychology. Why would I start there? Here's the thing. One of the things that psychology does is it helps us get the word out in a way that our society is going to believe in and support. Here's the thing, you may have the cure to cancer, but if nobody believes you, you're nowhere, right? If your government policy knows that we can inoculate everybody and get rid of polio, it's only as good as people's belief in that particular thing. And so one of the ways in which scientists struggle is trying to persuade people to have the correct attitude towards the things they need to be doing. And that's because people just don't trust scientists anymore. Now, there's a branch of psychology that's interested in persuasive messages, and it's called social psychology. I am social psychology, and really, your attitude towards science is something that we can look at and understand how it's affected. Now, you can think of what's your attitude towards the COVID vaccine. Now, the weird thing is attitudes can be three different things. You can display an attitude by whether or not you say you like something or don't like something. So I can have a feeling, I don't like the COVID virus, the COVID vaccine. You might then say, well, why don't you? I might then give you a belief, but that belief still conveys an attitude. I don't think they work. That's an evaluative statement. Even though it's a belief, it's not a feeling, it's still an evaluative statement. And then I might say, you know what, I'm going to demonstrate my attitude by not getting the damn virus. What are you going to get the vaccine? What are you going to do about that? So what I want you to think about is which attitude do you fall down? Now, it doesn't matter to me. And actually, I've got like 2 or 3 boosters, so I'm a vaccine guy, all right? So don't think that. But, you know, each and every one of us is going to have a different attitude. Some of us are science loyalists, and some of us may be science skeptics. And I'm going to point to this guy. I would point to you as inside, but I want people to think that that's really you. Okay? And so, in a sense, this is an attitude that social psychologists want to shape. Now, here's something interesting I think you should look at. Now, social psychology has shown if you want to change people's attitudes, you have to think about 2 different things. Number 1, can the person understand what you're talking about? And number 2, do they care? Are they motivated to process? Now, when I start trying to convince you of this or that, you can pay attention to 2 types of information. You can listen to my scientific proof and think deeply about what I'm saying. You can engage in what we call elaborative rehearsal, or you can look and say, what does his name tag say? Does he have a white coat on? Does he have a pair of those a stethoscope, right? Does he look like he could be a doctor? And that's what we would call the low elaboration route. And so when somebody gives you a persuasive message, you can pay attention to their message 1 of 2 ways. You can think about what they're saying. You can be a scientist, right? Or you can engage in a thoughtless processing, and you can just look at whether or not they look like somebody you would trust. Peripheral processing. Now, what determines whether or not you use peripheral processing? If you can, and if you have the ability to process. Now, here's the thing. When I look at my science skeptics, they're paranoid. They think the government's always out to get them. They hate any time a doctor is sitting next to an establishment figure. And they use peripheral processing. All those science skeptics, those people who won't get vaccines, you folks, you are all science skeptics, all right? And you are using a low level of elaboration. Here's the other thing, though. The science loyalists, like myself, are also using peripheral cues. Because if I see somebody in a doctor's coat, I automatically believe them, right? So if you think about it, science loyalists and science skeptics really are not thinking about the message. If you're a liberal Democrat, you automatically believe in everything the Surgeon General says about the vaccine. On the other hand, if you feel yourself more of a MAGA type, you're going to hate everything about the vaccine, and neither one of these people is paying attention to what's really, really important. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about research methods so that from here on out, when somebody gives you a persuasive message about something scientific, instead of looking at their coat or what they look like, you're actually going to think about what it is they're saying. And that's my goal for you. Now, if you want to see what some examples of peripheral persuasion cues, you can look at this link right here. Things like American flags or making people cheer while somebody talks. Those are all peripheral cues that really don't have anything to do with whether or not the argument's good or not, but they make you believe in the argument. And you can read about this in chapter 12. Now, so we want to be a good consumer. Here's the first thing you need to think about. Science moves in this really weird way where we develop theories, and these theories lead to hypotheses. So a theory is an explanation that tells you why something happens. It explains a phenomenon and it tells us why that phenomenon is happening. An explanation of why something happens. Here's a theory. People develop low self-esteem because they don't have any friends. I just made that up. Pulled it out of the air. It's not really true, okay? I just pulled it out of the air. But that's a theory. You might say, well, why don't some people have friends? Well, they have no confidence, no self-esteem. That's a theory. Now, in order to know if a theory is true, the scientist tests it with a hypothesis. Can anybody tell me what is that 5th grade definition that we all got about what a hypothesis is? What did your science teacher tell you a hypothesis was in 5th grade? Does anybody remember? An educated guess. Absolutely right. You learned that too. Fantastic. You know why it's educated? Did you ever think about why it's educated? It's educated because it comes from a theory. If the theory is true, then I should guess that this happens. Does that make sense? So really, a hypothesis is a specific thing that you ought to be able to see if your theory is true. All right? So if my theory is true, that people with low self-esteem, they have low self-esteem because they have no friends, then here's what I should be able to do. I should be able to ask you to tell me how many friends you have, how many friends do you have, how many friends do you have, how many friends do you have, and then I should be able to give you a self-esteem questionnaire, and the people who have fewer friends should have lower self-esteem on that questionnaire. Does that make sense? Okay? And so a hypothesis is simply an observable demonstration of your theory. Now, a good hypothesis is only useful if it can be disproven. And we have this thing called falsifiability. If your theory or your hypothesis can't be proved false, then I'm never going to accept it as being true. And furthermore, theories are never, you can never prove a theory is true. You can only prove that a theory is false. Because no matter how many times you support the theory, there's always the next time when your theory could be wrong. So here's another theory. Geese are white. All geese are white. And I can walk out and I can see a white goose, and I can see a white goose, and I can see a white goose. And my theory seems true, but the first time I see a black or brown goose, what happens to my theory? Out the window. So a theory and a hypothesis can only be true if you can really test it, and it can fail, and it's only true until it fails once. Until it fails once. And that's called the principle of falsifiability. So when somebody ever gives you a hypothesis test, a test of a theory they have, make sure that that theory, that hypothesis test, has a situation where it can be wrong. Okay? Sigmund Freud and a lot of the early crazy psychoanalysts had theories that you could never prove wrong. If you can't prove it wrong, then I'm not going to accept that it could ever possibly be right. And so science is about developing a theory, testing it with a hypothesis. If my theory is wrong, I adjust it, test it again with another hypothesis. And as we test our theories multiple times and change our theories to accept the new information, we get closer and closer and closer to the truth. In fact, you know what? You can think about it this way. You can think about it this way. This is the truth. This is truth, not proof. This is truth. And in a sense, every time we're going around, we're circling around this thing called the truth. And every time we test a hypothesis, we get closer and closer and closer to the truth. Does that make sense? That's a horrible sort of a definition way to describe it, but I'm going to do it anyhow. Okay? So, now, having said that, you folks, in order to test people and to evaluate scientific claims, you need to know how to read a scientific journal article. How many of you have actually read a journal article before? Went through one of those ones. Did any of you ever have a teacher that made you do that? 1, 2. Wow, it's a non-zero number. Fantastic. What about you folks online? Anybody online ever read a scientific article? Now, they're kind of hard to read, right? And they've got a lot of jargon, etc., etc. But what you need to do is you need to understand the parts of a research process and how they are represented in a research article. Now, there are lots of different types of research articles. There are research articles about one experiment. There are some articles that are what we call research synthesis, and they'll look at 100 different studies at the same time. We're talking about your typical scientific article that demonstrates one finding. Let's say the finding that people with fewer friends have low self-esteem, right? If you were to go to a paper that I wrote on that, you would see that my paper has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts, all right? In the introduction, and these parts of the paper are going to have headings in them. Scientists aren't very creative that way. You're going to have a part that says introduction, then a part that has a heading that says methods, a part that says results, all right? Now, in the introduction is where the scientist is going to present the theory and the hypothesis that they want to use to test that theory. So if we were doing the self-esteem, I would tell you my theory, why I think self-esteem depends upon your number of friends. And then I would say, and in my study, what I'm going to do is measure people's self-esteem and find out how many friends. And my hypothesis is, and I'm going to do all that in the intro. In the methods, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you exactly how I carried that study out. Which self-esteem scale did I use? Is it a good one? Is it a bad one? You don't know, but I'm going to tell you so you can evaluate it. I then ask my students about their number of friends. Well, how did you find out? Did they guess? Did they show you the number of people in their phones, the number of friends they have on social media? There's a lot of different ways to measure friends. So you need to see exactly how I measured friends to see if it's a good way to do that. Now, you need the methods because you want to make sure that I did the right experiment, that I gathered my data correctly, all right? Now, you've got that in my methods. And then my results are where I give you the numbers, the statistics, the graphs, the charts that explain why I think my data do or do not support my hypothesis. We're not even going to get into inferential statistics and t-tests and chi-squared and analysis of variance. I'll leave that for your statistics class. But there are a variety of statistical methods that we can use to evaluate how strongly our data support or do not support our results. Then in the final part of the written part of the paper is a discussion. And this is where I ask the question, did I support my hypothesis? If so, what do I think I need to do next? If I didn't support my hypothesis and my theory, how do I need to change my theory? And so that's where I talk about that in the discussion. Then if I have any pictures, any charts, any tables, any graphs, I put them in the back of the paper. And then if I was going to use a self-esteem questionnaire, I would put that at the back of the paper so you can look at it and see what kind of instrument I used. Now, if you'll notice, What this does is this leads you specifically through how I came to my theory, how I tested my theory, what my numbers say, and what I believe they say. Any scientific claim you get, is based on a paper that you can go and look at. I promise you, you can. So when I had my little cancerous tumor, I became a cancer expert. I was on PubMed reading all of the articles to find out scientifically. I wasn't going to let that freaking doctor tell me what to take or what not to take. Oh no, I had those skills. So I went through and I looked at 15 or 20 papers before I got to the doctor. And you know what I found? He gave me better answers when he knew that I knew something. He knew he couldn't give me the short story or push me around. I actually felt like I was treated with a little more respect because I was able to be a good consumer of research. Anything you want to know about, if there's a sickness or a vaccine or cancer or whatever, you can find out about it and you can do your own scientific research. Now, reading articles and comments that people put on TikTok ain't research, okay? A lot of people call that research. That's not research. Research is done by people who follow this specific methodology. You should spend your time doing that as well. Okay, Michael Kane online says he's read scientific articles. Fantastic. So is Jennifer, Tyler. Okay, so we've got some people online too. We've got 15 people online. Not a bad crowd. Congratulations, class. Please give yourself a round of applause. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Got a question over here.
I don't think that TikTok is always wrong.
No, it's not always wrong.
TikTok has kind of helped me with a lot of stuff. I don't know, I think it's kind of like the new version of research that's quicker and faster, but like understanding like the scientific aspect of it, like with you having the cancer situation and having the graphs and stuff, like I can understand that, but TikTok is kind of like the new method of research because it takes less time because all you have to do is search it. And then most of the time there's a video of somebody testing the theory and deciding, like showing you whether it's true or not.
Okay, good point. So I've got a student in the classroom that says that TikTok may be the new form of research in today's modern world. And you know what? Just because you put it on TikTok doesn't mean it's wrong. Absolutely not. I can put Einstein's theory of relativity on TikTok and it would still be right. So you're right, the method in which you disseminate it is not necessarily indicative of what it is. So you're right, I said TikTok. I was actually using a peripheral cue, right? I was saying it's not true because it's on TikTok. Look at me being a poor scientist, right? But in a sense, if you do see it on TikTok and somebody says it's true, it then behooves you to make sure that the data back up their theory. Now, also, this student says that you can do the experiment right there on TikTok. That's a great point. You do not have to have PhD after your name in order to do an experiment. Very, very good. That's where we divide science from scientists. Scientists usually do science, but that doesn't mean that you and I can't do science. Brilliant point. So I am chastened by my student over here that sometimes we can find true scientific claims on TikTok. However, I'm going to tell her that maybe we should also double check to make sure. Okay, yes ma'am, another question.
I was just gonna say, you could probably think of it kind of like Wikipedia, where anyone can like say anything, but you just have to be careful.
Good point, right. Again, Isabella, right? Isabella likens it to Wikipedia. You're right, anybody can go through and change Wikipedia, so it can be right, you just have to know what you're looking for. Exactly. You know, a lot of my, some of the links that I'm going to have in this class are actually Wikipedia. You're right, they're not wrong, you just need to make sure, and I am, quote, the expert in this class, so I'm the one who's supposed to look and make sure that that stuff is right. But you're right, science doesn't have to be practiced in a test tube by a person with letters after their name. Wow, tough class here, good class, very good, right. Okay, now, let's talk about the different ways in which people can conduct research. How exactly are we going to measure the things that we are interested in? There are three broad methods that you're going to see used in this textbook that are used in the field of psychology. Basically, you can think about this broad grouping of what we call descriptive methods, which is where we're out just measuring things. Okay, and I can go out and observe things in the world. That's a legitimate way to gather observations, okay, and I can put that on TikTok too. You can go out and observe things. And then the second kind of study is what we call correlational designs. And this is where we measure more than one thing and we see if those two variables kind of change in any pattern that's interesting, okay? And then the third group are called experimental methods. And experimental methods are the best, and that's the only way we can truly say this crazy word, cause. Cause. That's the only way we can really say something causes something else. However, experiments are tough to set up, and when you set up a good experiment, a lot of times it doesn't look like the real world. So you can either get my laboratory and I can control it and make you do exactly what I want and say that this causes this, but it's not really like the real world. This is not the playground, no matter what I make it look like. It's still not like real life. And so these are three broad methods by which you can gather data. And all three of these methods are used in psychology. What you have to appreciate is what these methods can do, and more importantly, what they're not designed to do and what they can't do, okay? And the good scientist knows that all three of these ways are legitimate ways to do science, but you have to know what they can and can't do. And that's what I'm going to ask you to learn from this particular class. So let's go ahead and start with goodness me, oh, I know why it didn't. Hold on, let me make sure I got things right. Yeah, okay, we're set. All right, cool. All right, so let's start with descriptive methods. Sometimes in psychology, we just observe things. We just observe things. In fact, probably the most famous way of learning anything in psychology is to observe a unique person whose brain is different from everybody else. Usually these people suffer brain damage. And what we do is we look at what part of their brain is damaged, we look at what they can't do, and then we decide that that part of the brain must be responsible for that particular activity. And so one of the main ways that we just observe people is through these things called case studies. Case study is an in-depth, usually long-term look at one person who has something unique or interesting about her. Okay, so there's the story of the wild child, a young girl who was kept locked up without human contact for 11 years, the first of 11 years of her life. Wow, what an interesting story. Wouldn't you like to find out what happens when nobody talks to you for the first 11 years of your life? There's another gentleman named Clive Waring who had a fever and it burned out part of his brain, and now he has a 7-second memory. He can't remember anything longer than 7 seconds. Each and every one of these cases shows us something interesting about human psychology. That's one of the big ways we're going to talk about biopsych in this class. And for you, I would like for you to go and read about Phineas Gage. He's one of the earliest and most famous case studies in psychology. Another way we could do research is we could just go out and watch human beings in their natural environment, okay? One of the ways in which I do an observational study the first day of every semester when I teach a seated class is I watch you people when you come in the classroom. Some of you want to talk to me. Some of you don't want to talk to me. Some of you will smile. Some of you refuse to make eye contact. During the first day of class, I find out who my extroverted and introverted students are. You're going to be a little more extroverted. You're going to be a little more extroverted. You'll probably be more extroverted. I'll bet you're going to be more extroverted because y'all were looking at me and you're talking to me. I, in a sense, can observe a group of people and make statements about psychological phenomenon. So participants, usually quite a few, are observed and measured on one or more qualities as they interact with their natural environments. You know, one of the interesting studies that we do in social psychology demonstrates this thing called bystander apathy. Check this out. Did you know that if you get hurt in public, you are less likely to get help if there are a lot of people around?
Because everybody's going to stand around and record.
There's that too, right? And everybody thinks I can record while somebody else is doing the work. It actually turns out you are better off getting hurt where only one person is around. It's called bystander apathy. You know how you do this experiment? You go out in public and have somebody lay down and pretend they're hurt, and you hide in the bushes and watch and see how many people help them. This is a classic naturalistic observation. And the cool thing about naturalistic observations is people don't know that they're being watched. Hopefully, they will act more realistically. Now, sometimes you can bring people into the laboratory and watch them too. One of the most famous studies that we're going to talk about was done by this lady named Mary Ainsworth, a developmental psychologist. And she brought little toddlers into the laboratory one at a time with their parent, their primary caregiver. This was the 60s, so it was typically a mom, right? They brought them in. They let the baby and the mom play for about 3 or 4 minutes. When the baby got comfortable, a stranger would come in. And that really freaks out a 14-month-old. They kind of climb and get close to their mom. And then their mom would get up and leave the room and leave them alone with the stranger. What do you think all these kids did? Every last one of them started crying. But then what she wanted to find out was how quickly would they stop crying when mom came back in. And she found that there are 3 basic patterns. Some kids are comforted really quickly and go back to normal. Some kids get real clingy and won't let go of mother even after a while. And still a third group of kids seem pissed at mom and wouldn't go back to her like they were punishing her. And so she uses laboratory observation to demonstrate that there are really 3 different types of mother-infant bonds. What she'd call the secure attachment, the ambivalent anxious attachment or clingy, and the avoidant attachment, the mom you suck kind of attachment style, right? And she did that with a laboratory observations, right? And sometimes you'll even see somebody combining a couple of these methods. For those of you that choose to do the writing assignment for number 2, you will have to watch Deb Roy's Birth of a Word. It's a really cool 15-minute TED Talk about a guy who wanted to understand how a child learns a word. How do they go through going from whatever they call that thing, a boo, to a bubby? You know what I mean? How does that word occur? And it's a really nifty study, and that's going to be a part of homework too. All right. Do I have any questions? The source is coming from Naka. So Tyler Healy says that, he's talking about the your TikTok research comment. He actually said sometimes research coming from a non-academic background can provide an alternate perspective to an academic one. That's actually a pretty good point, don't you think? That's a great point, Tyler. Sometimes I get so tied up in academic concerns that we miss the obvious thing. Great point. Great point. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now, the second method, sometimes we're not just interested in measuring a variable. We instead might want to measure 2 variables and see how these variables change. Let me see here. Write this off. Let me give you an example if I can. Okay, here we are, right here. So, what if I was to tell you that I think people with more self-esteem make more money? Self-esteem is related to income level. That's a theory. Is it a good theory or a bad theory?
I think it's a good one.
And you can crap on it if you want. It won't hurt my feelings. I just made it up, pulled it out of the air. Is it a good theory? Can anybody think of a better theory?
People who apply themselves are successful. I don't really think. Why does your self-esteem for trying to successful?
I guess when you're talking about how successful, you got to network with other people. So if you're confident with yourself, then you'll be able to be confident with other people talking.
That's my crappy theory right there.
Yeah.
That's my theory. Yeah, you have to network to make money. The more confident you feel, it's blah, blah, blah. It's my theory. Let's tear it apart here with a demonstration. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring people into the lab, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them take a self-esteem scale. You know, there's actually a very famous self-esteem scale called the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale, the RSE. I think it's 10 questions, and you get a score from 0 to 20. So I can measure your self-esteem. And let's say it goes from 0, you got no self-esteem, to 20, you're an egomaniac, right? Let's put it somewhere along there. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask you the second variable. How much money do you make a year? Let's say I ask that. And it goes from, I don't have a job, I don't make anything in school, all the way up here to, what's a good number? Let's say 100K. Let's, just for our purposes here, I know there are richer people, Jay-Z does exist, but we're going to talk about regular folk like us. All right, and so for each person, I'm going to find out two things, your level of self-esteem and the income you make. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a point right there. Your self-esteem, let's say, is 10, and let's say you make $20,000 a year. $100,000 a year, egomaniac. $2,000 a year, no confidence. And so what I would do is I would put these scatter points up here. Does everyone see these scatter points? Now, do we see a trend in these scatter points? What is this trend? Upper, right here. Okay. So in a correlational technique, what I'm doing is I'm just measuring two variables, and then I'm going to do a scatter plot, and then I'm going to use a statistical technique called a correlational statistic to judge how linear this is. And what I want to know is, does it go in this direction? And are the numbers close? That's how tight the distribution is, or how spread out they are, right? And the more that they're closer to this imaginary line, the more of a linear relationship between these two variables is. All right? Now, if you look at the PowerPoint presentation, you'll notice we have all kinds of different patterns of correlations. You'll notice in the bottom two parts of the screen, we've got a strong positive correlation and a moderate positive correlation. Now, by positive, that means it goes up as it goes right, okay? So it goes this way, and the closer the dots are to the imaginary line, the stronger the correlation is, okay? The stronger the correlation is. So you see the first three are positive correlations. You'll notice in the middle we have no correlation. What I might do is I might do your shoe size and the amount of money you make. And I might find that there's absolutely no relationship, right? Or the number of brothers or sisters you have, or whatever. I might find there's no relationship. Now, sometimes we might have what's called a negative relationship. As one variable goes up, the other goes down. So we can think about it this way. The number of beers you drink before the exam and your exam grade, right? What might happen here? I'm going to drink 12 beers the night before the exam, and I'm not going to do very well on the exam. He's not going to drink any, and he's going to study. Dadgummit.
You gotta put an outlier on there.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Or they get the weights to get the 100.
Yeah, actually, this is the beers. Right. And this is that one person
Yeah,
right here.
wow.
I hate that person, right? Absolutely. But most we're going to see this. This is a negative correlation. All right? So the point that we're making here is that in the correlation, we just measure two variables. Now, the cool thing is I can measure variables that just exist. The number of cigarettes you smoke a day, the number of alcoholic drinks you drink every day, the number of times you broke into somebody's house. I can measure variables that just occur and make statements about things that happen that we typically can't do in an experiment. And I can make all of these statements about the relationships between variables. However, there's one thing we need to keep in mind. This is the thing with correlation. Correlation does not equal causation. Correlation does not equal causation. Here's the thing. I might say that self-esteem is related to your level of income. And what was our theory you said? We got confidence, we meet people, meet people leads to money. How about this alternate explanation? The more money you have, the more confident you'll feel. How about that link between self-esteem? So really, we're saying self-esteem doesn't cause the income. Oh, how about that, right? That's what we would call the reverse causality problem. Or how about this? If you're really good looking, you'll feel confident about yourself and you always get hired and get the job, right? I mean, that's kind of unfair, but it might work that way. So maybe there's a third variable that affects both of them. If you're not good looking, you won't feel confident and you won't get money. And you think, wow, there's a link between self-esteem and money, but it's actually attractiveness, or it could be education, or it could be any other variable. The problem with correlations is that when we see them, just make sure that a correlation does not demonstrate causation. All right? Now, here's the thing. We're going to see lots of research studies about the difference between groups of people. So we might say, I'm going to look at the difference between men and women. I'm going to look at the difference between Americans and non-Americans. I'm going to look at the difference between minorities and non-minorities, or any of these other naturally occurring variables. Here's the deal. You have to be careful. These are what we call quasi-experimental variables, because I can't assign you to be of one gender or the other. You just are that gender or you're not that gender. So I don't know what your experience is. Is it related to your biological gender, or is it related to the environment that affects your biological gender? So we have to be careful with correlational variables. Now, the gold standard for experiments, if you want to publish in the field of psychology, okay, you have to do an experiment. It's not fair, and in fact, there are people in the science who actually complain about this. They call it the experimental bias. If you want to publish in the modern scientific journals, you have to run an experiment. If you don't run an experiment, nobody will publish your study. Now, you can do a correlation too, but you better have an experiment in your research study, right? So, whenever you're reading about a new treatment for cancer or this or that, it better be an experiment. Otherwise, they're not proving anything. Now, what's an experiment? An experiment is different in that I randomly assign you to the variable. I randomly assign you. An experiment requires an independent variable, a dependent variable, and random assignment. Now, what I'd like to do real quick for the class, for those of you at home, there's a video in your Blackboard PowerPoint. I want you to go ahead and watch it. We're going to watch it here in the class on our own, okay? And that is right here. Watch this short video on independent, dependent, and control variables. So go ahead and if you would, please watch this video. We're going to watch it here.
Research shows nostalgia can help you remember ads. So customize and save with Liberty Mutual.
And the results are in. Tom, you are 99.9%.
Hi everyone and welcome back to High School Science 101. Today I am re-recording the first video that I uploaded because it was pretty low quality and I wasn't really happy with it. So this is in high definition. We're covering our three main variables in science, which are our independent, dependent and controlled variables. Let's get started. To explain these variables, there's a very simple experiment I like to demonstrate. Firstly, let's say that this is a running track and we have our runner here and he's going to run 100 meters. But each time he runs it, he's going to wear a different type of shoe. So we've got runners, casual shoes and boots. And this is the thing that's going to change each time he runs this 100 meters. And this is called our independent variable. That's the thing that we're going to change each time he runs this experiment. So let's put his runners on first. We start the timer, he runs his 100 meters. We stop the timer and he got a time of 27.3 seconds. And this is the thing that we're measuring. The thing that we're measuring in the experiment is called our dependent variable. It depends on our independent variable. He got a time of 27.3 seconds with his runners. We reset him back to the start. We put his casual shoes on. We start the timer. He runs the 100 meters. And this time, he got a time of 30.2 seconds. So a little bit slower this time. We take him back to the start. We put his boots on. We start the timer. He runs the 100 meters. We stop the timer. And this time, he got a time of 33.3 seconds, which was his slowest time. So we can say that he runs the fastest with his runners, followed by his casual shoes, and then he runs the slowest in his boots. But that's not everything to this experiment. There's a few other things that we need to consider. The first thing to consider is the weather. We need to make sure that the weather was kept the same each time he ran the 100 meters. If it was sunny when he was wearing his runners, but if it was raining when he wore the other shoes, that's not really a fair comparison because the weather could have had an impact on his ability to run. The clothing that he was wearing is also something that we need to consider. We need to make sure that he was wearing the same clothes every time he ran this 100 meters. If he was wearing running gear, wearing his runners, he had to be wearing running gear for the other ones as well. Otherwise his clothing could have affected his time. Same with the surface. If he was running on concrete or wood or grass, we need to make sure that that was the same every time he ran this 100 meters so that any difference in time was mainly just due to the shoes that he was wearing. That's what we're trying to achieve, an accurate and fair comparison between the types of shoes. Because these are the things that we're trying to control in this experiment, we call them controlled variables. And that's it for today's lesson. I hope you learned something. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and I will.
All right, we're back. Oh, Nelly, not good. Here we go. All right, so in a sense, that was an experiment. You see, the independent variable is the variable we change. The dependent variable is the variable we measure. Let's do this self-esteem study, but let's do it as an experiment now. How about this? How about I bring people into the laboratory? I say, hey, give me a list of your 10 favorite friends. And you give me a list of those 10 favorite friends. I then leave the room, spend 5 minutes away, and I come back in and I tell you one of the things. Hey, I talked to your 10 friends. None of them really actually like you. Or I could say, hey, I talked to your 10 friends and they all said, you are the man. And then what I do is I give you a self-esteem questionnaire. Who should have the higher self-esteem? This guy. Now, because you both were presumably the same, I randomly picked you to be the bad guy and I picked you to be the good guy, but I could have randomly picked it either way. And if I randomly pick you into two groups and I tell half of you your friends hate you, and I tell half of you your friends love you, and there's a difference in self-esteem, now I've actually shown experimentally that the number of friends affects your self-esteem. Do you see the difference there? Now, here's the deal. One of the things that you have to pay attention to when you look at scientific papers, if somebody's making a causal statement, A causes B, they have to have random assignment to conditions. You notice that when this guy did his experiment, he did the best shoes first, he did the dress shoes second, he did the boots third. Maybe the person was just tired the third time, right? Would have been better if he'd had 3 different experiments. One day we run with the tennis shoes first. The second day we run with the dress shoes first. The third day we run with the boots first, right? And see, because you never know what the effective order could have. And so what I want you to know when you are looking at scientific papers from here on out is that somebody has to have a theory and a testable hypothesis. You need to make sure that their research method is, if they're going to make a statement of cause, that they're doing an experiment. And you have to consider when you see correlations, that correlation relationships could go either way. And so hopefully when you go out and look at scientific papers, instead of just believing somebody, try to go look at the research paper that they're basing their opinion on. You would be surprised how available all that stuff is. And begin to arm yourself with the facts instead of just believing your psychology teacher or anybody else. In fact, I invite every one of you this summer, fact check me as often and as relentlessly as you possibly can. Just because I'm standing in front doesn't mean I'm right, okay? That's a peripheral cue. Somebody put me in front and I'm older than you. That's a peripheral cue. Don't necessarily believe that. Instead, look at the facts. And if I'm wrong, I will eat my words right here in front of you. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to let us out a little bit early today. Anybody got a problem with that? I didn't think so. Okay, folks, have a great day. Everybody online, thanks for coming. I will see you Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Take care.